All right, so again, thank you and welcome everybody. This is our FY 2024 NADPRP funding opportunity webinar where we're presenting information for applicants. So what we're going to cover today is I want to give a very quick introduction about the NADPRP program and talk about this year's funding priorities and the funding opportunity announcement. Then Laura's going to go into how to apply. And Andrea's going to cover the guidelines for how to use NADPRP funds and what's allowed and not allowed. And then we're going to cover a little bit about what happens after you submit the proposal and give you some tips. We're going to have plenty of time at the end for any questions. So just really quickly about the NADPRP program. You can learn a great deal about the NADPRP program by visiting our website. You simply Google APHIS NADPRP, NADPRP, and you should be able to find us. So Congress created this program in the 2018 Farm Bill as one of 3 programs that were established to support animal health needs. And this program is designed to provide funding to support high-value projects that are directed toward preventing and preparing for high consequence animal disease outbreaks. So a few things that you should know as applicants to this funding opportunity. The NADPRP program offers annual competitive funding opportunities, and we have both this general funding opportunity, which is announced right now and we're talking about today. We also have a separate tribal funding opportunity. And if you're a tribal partner who has joined us, you are welcome to apply to this current funding opportunity or wait until October when we announce the tribal funding opportunity. So the NADPRP program allows us to enter into cooperative agreements or interagency agreements with many different types of applicants. So the applicants can include states, tribes, land-grant universities, and colleges of veterinary medicine, industry organizations, veterinary organizations, and other federal agencies. And because Congress provided the funding to us as no year money, we are able to enter into cooperative agreements that last up to 24 months. And just to mention that the average award for a NADPRP project is about $225,000. And you can visit our NADPRP website to have a look at the projects that we've funded in the past and see that we fund really a broad range of types of projects at many different funding levels. So that's just a little bit about the program. And this is specifically about this year's funding opportunity. So this year, NADPRP, or APHIS, is making up to $17 million available to support some new projects. And the deadline for your applications is October 20th. And you will hear us repeat that a couple of times throughout our presentation today. Please make a note that the deadline is October 20th. So things you should know, your proposals should directly support one of the 9 funding priorities that are listed in our funding opportunity announcement, and I'm going to go over those a little bit today. There's no per project funding limit, but as I said, the average is about $225,000. As an individual applicant, you can submit as many proposals as you want, or you can be involved in multiple projects. We recommend for this year's funding opportunity that you expect your new project to start between May 1st and June 30th of 2024. All right, so just to recap a few key dates, as I said, the application deadline is October 20th. And then a few other things happen. It takes us a while to do some initial screening and to review the proposals. We hope to complete the review by January. And then in February, we have time set aside to go through our USDA approval process. Because this is Farm Bill funds, the approval process is a little longer than in some of our other USDA and APHIS funding opportunity programs. So we hope to be notifying applicants about their award status by April. And so this leads us to that, our recommendation that new projects start and be scheduled to start between May and June of 2024. So as you develop your proposal, you'll have to put in there your expected start dates. So keep these dates in mind. Okay, so I want to talk with you a little bit about this year's funding priority topic areas. In the FY24 NADPRP funding opportunity, the funding will be directed to projects in these 9 areas. So the first thing I want to say is that I'm just going to briefly describe these topic areas to you. but I strongly encourage you to go and do our funding opportunity announcement, which is our full announcement document. There's an appendix in there that does a deep dive on each one of these topics, and it will go into some real details about the specific types of projects that we are prioritizing for funding this year. So the first of these topic areas is we're looking for projects that will help develop, enhance, and exercise state and tribal animal disease emergency response plans. So that can include a couple of things like it might be a vaccination plan, how a state would manage vaccine distribution in an outbreak. It could be a plan for the initial 72 hours of a response. It might be a plan for making animal movement decisions. It could be a state or tribal plan for how they would manage carcass disposal in a disease outbreak, any of those sorts of things. And again, you can read more details about those in the funding opportunity announcement. So the second topic area is projects that enhance livestock and poultry biosecurity and help producers implement better and more consistent biosecurity practices. The third topic area is projects that enhance their nation's ability to conduct depopulation, carcass disposal, and decontamination activities in the event of an animal disease outbreak emergency. Another funding priority is projects that help support animal movement decisions. So those might be risk analyses of the risks of moving animals in certain situations in a disease outbreak scenario. It might also be projects related to training or exercising a state or tribal entities in how they will make animal movement decisions and enforce animal movement decisions in an outbreak. So that includes quarantine. So we're also looking for projects in areas of animal disease traceability. And you'll notice in the funding opportunity announcement that a lot of the things we're really interested in supporting this year in the area of animal disease traceability is related to traceability of animals in livestock markets. So every year in the NADPRP program, we support projects related to outreach and education on topics related to animal disease prevention and preparedness and response. We also fund many projects that are focused on developing and delivering training and exercises to animal ag sector responders and also to producers. So we have two sort of special topic areas in this year's funding opportunity announcement. We're looking for proposals that will advance the development of sheep and goat vaccines. And we're also looking for projects that will enhance aquatic animal disease preparedness and response. So again, this is just a super quick recap. Please go to our funding opportunity announcement, look at that appendix if you're interested in these topic areas, and that'll give you some really rich examples of the really nitty-gritty details of the types of projects we will prioritize, and also has some example projects in there. So the other thing I want to mention is that in the funding opportunity announcement and in this webinar today, we're going to use the word livestock a lot. And for the NADPRP program, we use the Animal Health Protection Act's definition of livestock, which is all farm-raised animals. So that's very inclusive. So that means it does include poultry, it includes horses, it includes aquaculture species, as well as some of our more traditional farm-raised animals. So keep that in mind, especially if you might be interested in submitting a proposal related to aquatic animal health, that the word livestock, think of it interchangeably with all of these different species and sectors. All right, so this is my last slide for the introductory section. There's certain things that BS looks for and APHIS looks for in all of the funding, all of the proposals that are submitted. We're always looking for proposals where the project is going to address a significant known gap or problem or an area of concern related to animal disease prevention, preparedness, and response. And this is particularly important if you have a project that's focused on something that was learned from a recent event or recent exercise. So keep that in mind as you think of your proposal ideas. We also always fund projects that build on scientifically based innovation, that use existing tools and techniques and leverage those existing tools and materials. And we also like to fund projects that build on findings from projects that were previously funded by NADPRP or previously funded through other programs. And lastly, we keep an eye on and look out for projects that are really addressing the needs of high risk, underserved, non-traditional, niche, and hard to reach audiences. So these are just a few things. You can read other just general hints like this in our funding opportunity announcement. All right, so thanks for hanging in there. Now I'm going to hand it over to Laura, and Laura is going to talk with us about how to apply for NADPRP funds.
So as Julie said, I'm going to talk about how you can apply for the NADPRP funding opportunity announcement. And we can start with the next slide. So you're going to hear me reiterate many times about starting early. And so I'll explain why a little bit further, but we highly encourage everybody to start this process early, even if you are not a brand new recipient or applicant, because just making sure that your contacts are up to date and everything is ready to go is very important. So USDA uses a system called Easy Fed Grants to manage our cooperative agreements and grants. So if you think you'll ever apply for Farm Bill funding, we strongly encourage you to do the following pre-work right away to avoid any obstacles or delays during the application process. First, you should be sure to register with a sam.gov account. This process can take up to 2 weeks for your account to show up in federal systems, which is why we encourage that to be taken ahead of time. Also, note that there's a mandatory requirement in addition to registering with sam.gov, which is to complete the Financial Assistance Certification Report. Once you've completed those steps, you then have the information that you need to create an e-authentication account. And then the last step is to establish an Easy Fed Grants account to be able to apply for the opportunity. So just a few friendly reminders on this slide. So if you're a new applicant, please refer to Appendix 1 under New Applicant Information in the Funding Opportunity Announcement. In addition, please remember that sam.gov is they're a little bit behind right now, and processing tickets and the current turnaround time is around 2 weeks. So we highly recommend registering in sam.gov right away. And the reason, again, that we stress these steps done early is because almost every year we put out or every year we have a funding opportunity, we have an applicant who calls us frantic on the last day to apply, and either someone in their organization's out of town, and they're a key component in signing the application for it to be fully submitted and Easy Fed Grants. We've had the certifying official is out of town, or the sam.gov wasn't set up until the week of and it didn't fully get processed in time. Just lots of little nuances that can come up with all these different systems. And so it's sad to see people who, really can't get their applications in on time. So next slide, please. So all non-federal applicants must submit your application using Easy Fed Grants. And this slide contains links with resources to assist in learning the Easy Fed Grant system. And for federal applicants, you must submit your application via email to the NADPRP email address. And when you're submitting your application attachments, please refer to the funding opportunity announcement, Appendix 2, Tips for Applicants, for further information there. Next slide. So a little bit more about Easy Fed Grants. Requesting access to Easy Fed Grants requires a few prior steps, as mentioned on the previous slides. The first step is to have a USDA Level 2 e-authentication account, and the second is to then request your access to Easy Fed Grants. And for help with these steps, you can visit the website listed on this slide, which can also be found in the Funding Opportunity Announcement Appendix 1. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what to include in an application. For non-federal applicants, the required documents to be included in an application package are the work plan, the financial plan, and the standard forms 424 and 424A. The work plan and financial plan templates are strongly encouraged to be used, and they can be found on the NADPRP website. Federal applicants can email their work plan and financial plans to the NADPRP email address. For award proposals that are greater than $100,000, there's 2 additional forms that are required. Those forms are the certification regarding lobbying and the disclosure of lobbying activities. Also, for award proposals claiming indirect costs, then a copy of your current and fully signed negotiated indirect cost rate agreement must also be submitted. And lastly, for those states that require the single point of contact correspondence, or SPOC for short, a copy of that letter or waiver of review must be attached. And all of these forms can be found on the NADPRP website. Next slide. A little bit more about the SPOC. If your state participates in the SPOC review process, which is an executive order that's called the Intergovernmental Review of Federal Programs, then the letter or email from the SPOC is required as part of the application package. There's an active link to the right on this slide, which will pull up the list of states that are currently participating under the APHIS CFDA number 10.025, and the contact person will be listed as well. And also remember that on the application, the SF424, item 19, a selection of A or B is required. Next slide. So a little bit more on the work plan. As mentioned earlier, the work plan template can be found on the NADPRP website, and we strongly encourage that the template be used. The work plan is the body of your proposal, and the template gives detailed instructions for all the required information to include in your work plan. If the template's not used, all the information requested in the template must still be included with the proposal should it align with the review criteria. Next slide. The financial plan template can also be found on the NADPRP website. The template's an Excel file and steps you through how to lay out your budget. The work plan objectives should align with the financial plan, as well as keeping in mind that the cost categories or budget categories will also need to match up to the standard form 424A. It's important to ensure that the budget amounts are all aligned and consistent between the work plan, financial plan, SF424, and SF424A. This year, we broke out the objectives into separate columns in an effort to easily remove objectives if amounts, or to remove them effectively if reviewers decide not to fund certain objectives. But it helps us to align your financial plan with your work plan a lot easier. Next slide. Indirect costs. So calculating indirect costs can be a little confusing because different funding legislations have different requirements. So for the Farm Bill NADPRP funding legislation, Congress has written that all eligible applicants are only eligible for claiming up to 10% of indirect costs on the total project costs. So if you're an applicant that has other cooperative agreements with APHIS, with USDA APHIS, with different guidance on how to calculate your costs, that's because it's underneath a different appropriations bill. So I'll go over the basics for how to determine which formula to use for the application of the Farm Bill NADPRP funding opportunity. However, more information can be found in our guidelines for use of funds document, and there's examples in Appendix A. First, you may claim indirect costs if you have a current negotiated indirect cost rate agreement with a cognizant agency, and I'm going to refer to that agreement as a NICRA for short. And if you don't have a NICRA, you may claim what is called the de minimis. If you do have a current NICRA, You will need to make sure that your applied micro rate total for indirect costs isn't lower than applying for the Farm Bill 10% cap. If your rate calculation is lower, then you will need to use that one. Since the Farm Bill congressional language says that the 10% cap is on total project costs, the mathematical formula to use is total direct costs times 11.11%. If you do not have a NICRA and would like to claim the de minimis rate of 10%, you are limited to what you can apply the 10% to. These are called modified direct costs, and they include all direct salaries and wages, fringe benefits, materials, supplies, services, travel, subawards, and subcontracts, but only up to the first 25,000 of each subaward. And then the total amounts for those costs are then multiplied by 10%, not the 11.11%, to be in compliance with CFR guidelines. Okay, next slide, please. I think I'm going to turn it over to Andrea to go over the guidelines for using NADPRP funds.
I'm just going to touch on a few general guidelines for using NADPRP funds. Next slide. This is a list of the most common allowable costs. More details and definitions of each item listed can be found in the Guidelines for Use of Funds document posted on our NADPRP website. In general, when trying to decide if a cost might be allowable or not, it should be reasonable, allocable, and necessary for project completion. Keep in mind that although an item might be listed as allowable, it must still be reviewed and approved by APHIS. Next slide. This is a list of the most common unallowable costs. Again, more details and definitions of each item can be found on the Guidelines for Use of Funds document posted on the NADPRP website. If you have specific items that are questionable, please be sure to reach out to APHIS to discuss further. Next slide.
Okay, I was going to cover this slide. Thank you, Andrea. So this is new for our guidelines on the use of NADPRP funds for this year. In case you are thinking of submitting a proposal that is related to a livestock depopulation project. So the NADPRP funds can be used to support projects that help us increase our capacity and capability to conduct all critical activities in an animal disease emergency. And that may include critical activities that may be needed for livestock depopulation in an animal disease outbreak emergency situation. So we distinguish two different types of projects, and there's slightly different rules for each. So if you're doing a livestock depopulation project that's looking at methods and assessing and evaluating those methods, those projects can address methods that are not listed as preferred in the AVMA guidelines for the depopulation of animals. But the project does need to include how the findings will be shared with AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, and it also needs to describe how animal welfare concerns will be addressed, such as IACUC or IACUC review. So on this slide includes the link to those AVMA guidelines. When we post this webinar to our website, you'll be able to get to that link. You can also Google AVMA guidelines for the depopulation of animals. So the other type of project that NADPRP sometimes funds are projects that are looking at training animal ag responders to conduct safe and humane livestock depopulation for animal disease outbreak response. Now, these projects do have to focus on methods that are listed as preferred in the AVMA guidelines. So make sure you check that out. And please be sure that your proposal describes the type of animals by species and production type or class and the type of premises so that we can verify that the project does align with those AVMA guidelines. And as with the previous, these projects need to describe how animal welfare concerns will be addressed, such as an IACUC review. So if you have more questions about this, I'll be glad to take those at the end. But this is just sort of new this year and a little side note. So back to you, Andrea.
A Cost sharing or matching. There is no required cost sharing or matching for the NADPRP cooperative agreements. If a recipient does include cost sharing in their budget and it is accepted by APHIS, then the commitment of funds becomes legally binding and it must be reported on the standard form 425. Next slide. To sum up the guidelines for use of NADPRP funds, all costs in a work plan must be reasonable, necessary to the project goals, and should leverage existing recipient resources such as personnel, vehicles, computers, and those sorts of things where possible in order to achieve cost effectiveness. So while a trip for the project team may sound like a fantastic idea, it's probably not considered reasonable. I'm going to pass this now back to Julie to explain the final steps in submitting your proposal.
Sorry, everybody, I was muted for a second. Thank you very much, Andrea. Okay, so we're nearing the end now. I want to explain the proposal review process and then give you some tips, and then we will just sort of wrap it up and we'll have plenty of time for questions. Okay, so it is important when you're developing your proposal to understand how and who is going to review it. So just an overview of the process steps is, we have an initial screening. The initial screening criteria are outlined in the funding opportunity announcement. It's basically, do you as an applicant meet the basic eligibility criteria, and are you within the ballpark of the types of things that NADPRP will consider funding? Then we have a pretty big process where we identify different subject matter experts to review proposals, and those reviewers score, and they go through a lot of discussion on the proposals and they rank them and they make recommendations. So I want to pause here and just point out that last year in the NADPRP program, we received 106 proposals totaling over 33 million in requests. And last year, just as we did this year, we have only 17 million to spend. So these reviewers have to make a lot of really tough decisions, and they take that responsibility very seriously. So once the reviewers go through their process of making their recommendations and ranking the proposals, we go through a period where we get USDA approval that I mentioned earlier, and then we get to that final part where we'll notify you as applicants of your application status. So who reviews the proposal? We select subject matter experts in all areas of animal disease preparedness and response. These subject matter experts include people who work for APHIS and also plenty of people who work outside of the federal government. So I think the thing to really keep in mind is that the people that review these proposals are experts who are very much like many of you who are on this webinar. We don't use machines or artificial intelligence to review proposals. Real people are going to read and assess your proposal. And in fact, they're going to read it and assess it multiple times and probably with multiple different groups of people. So it's really important to make sure that when you write your proposal, you keep in mind the scoring criteria that they are going to use. So these are the basic criteria. Does the proposal have clear, strong, and direct support for one of the funding priority topics? And I've already covered these funding priority topics and mentioned that those priority topics are described in detail in the funding opportunity announcement. The second criteria is whether it addresses a critical need, gap, or known issue that's related to emerging or foreign animal disease preparedness and response. The third criteria is it feasible? Is it going to have a high feasibility of success? The fourth criteria is the impact and value of that project's deliverables and outcomes to stakeholders. So we even have a section of the work plan where we ask you as an applicant to describe what do you think the impact and value of this project is going to be, and take a moment to think about how you're going to respond to that, because that is one of the criteria that the reviewers are going to assess. And the last thing is cost effectiveness. And I really can't overemphasize this. The way that the NADPRP program has grown by the number of applications that we receive, our reviewers are really looking for very cost-effective projects. Think of them like, shoppers going through a grocery store with their shopping cart. Yeah, they're going to put a few luxury items in there, but mostly, they're looking for some bread and butter projects, some things that seem really practical. They love to see when we're leveraging materials that already exist or equipment that already exists. Of course, you're allowed to ask for all the bells and whistle in your proposal, but just, as a tip, just think of, these reviewers are regular people and they have to make really hard decisions about how to spend this limited amount of NADPRP funding. All right, so that was one tip, but I'm going to go through a few other helpful tips to keep in mind. So these are kind of the easy things on this slide. Make sure your application is complete. Make sure your title is descriptive. A work plan template provides an area for an award description, and it gives a few bullet points of exactly what you need to cover in that award description. Make sure that your award description is concise and it addresses those prompts. Overall, make sure your work plan, which is, the body of your proposal, make sure it's well organized and it's less than 25 pages. So don't get too carried away. This is something that Laura mentioned earlier, and we see it all the time. Make sure that your work plan, your financial plan, and your SF424 forms all indicate the same funding level. If we don't have the same funding level, same total amount requested in those documents, it gets really confusing for us. We have to circle back to you and ask, how much money do you really want? Because your financial plan says this, but your work plan says a different thing. So just take a moment before you hit send on that application package and make sure that those numbers are right. Also, just similar to that, the work plan will describe your project schedule, and the SF424 is going to ask for your project start and end dates. Same with the funding level. Make sure that the performance period that you're describing your work plan and the performance period dates that you're describing the SF424 form are the same. And again, as I said earlier, we recommend that your start date be in May or June of 2024. All right, so real quick on this one. When you go into your work plan and you're developing it, you're going to need to pick one topic that your proposal most strongly supports. But we understand that a lot of times people write a proposal and it might cover several different topics, and that's okay. Just pick one. And then when we review your proposal, we should be able to recognize that it might need to be reviewed in some different categories, and we'll do that. But you can also help us out by just saying, hey, we have other information part of the work plan template. You can just write in there, I'm submitting this as a outreach and education project, but maybe it also could be reviewed as a biosecurity project because it really is strongly rooted in both of those topics. So, okay, so I want to talk a little bit about some success factors, things that really make a proposal stand out from the crowd. Reviewers love to see it when a proposal just very strongly supports one of the funding priority topics, makes it really easy for them to decide if it's an appropriate thing for NADPRP to fund this year or not. As I said earlier, reviewers love a good deal. They want to see high value and low cost projects. Now we understand, and they understand very well, that sometimes projects cost a lot of money, but just really keep in mind that reviewers are looking for a project that they perceive to be really high value relative to those costs. Highly successful proposals are those where it's clear that the deliverables and how those deliverables are going to benefit stakeholders is clear. And there's plenty of opportunity in the work plan to describe how your deliverables are going to benefit stakeholders. Reviewers like to see collaboration and consultation with different stakeholders and experts who might help that project succeed. So if you're a university and you're doing biosecurity project in a certain, let's say, swine, you might want to reach out to your local or state or even your national swine industry organization, or you might want to reach out to your state animal health official. They don't have to be part of your project, but you might include them and state in the work plan that you're going to do some consultation with those to make sure that your proposal and the work you're doing is really grounded in the needs of the state and the needs of an industry group. And different scenarios can be set up with different types of collaborators. But I want to mention too that it might be important, depending on your project, to include APHIS veterinary services subject matter experts as consultants in your proposal. Not consultants who you're going to pay, but just people who you're going to consult with to make sure that your project is going to be successful. So a good example here is maybe you want to do a project related to information management in an animal disease outbreak, you're going to be comparing our USDA's EMERS system with a different IT system. We'll mention in there how you're going to talk with our USDA EMERS experts, so that reviewers see that, you know, there's going to be that inclusion, so that your project will represent a lot of different types of expertise. And the last thing on this slide is, you know, reviewers like to see proposals that leverage and build on critical needs that were identified from recent exercises or events. So I think many of you are aware that we're coming off of some of the biggest high-path avian influenza, the biggest animal disease outbreaks in our nation's history. So that's just one example. I'm not saying that we're only going to fund poultry projects related to high-path AI, but you know, if you can reference in your proposal a recent exercise or event where it was recognized that there's a certain critical need or gap, that's a really good asset to include in your proposal. So just a couple other success stories. Reviewers want to see logic in the flow of the proposal. They want to make sure that it's clear to them what are the activities that are going to be done, what the money is going to be used for, and how the activities and the money are going to lead to the deliverables. It's really, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a group of reviewers facilitating their conversation, and a reviewer says, I just can't figure out what it is they're trying to do. So just have your own check on that as you write your proposal. Are you being clear about what the activities are that you're going to be doing, how the money's going to be used, and how they're going to lead to that impact that you want your project to have? Another thing that proposed reviewers really look for is how are the applicants going to share their results with those stakeholders who might use or benefit from the findings? And that really might include presentations to key stakeholder groups. Sometimes that might be at a big national meeting, but sometimes it might be at a very local presentation. Maybe it's just a presentation to the members of the Office of a State Animal Health Official. Of course, it can be broader to a local or regional or a national level group. And last thing, you know, we've been mentioning this several times. They look like proposals that leverage and build on existing resources and knowledge, so that reviewers aren't perceiving that, oh, they want money, but they just seem to be reinventing that is already available on the web, or it's already available from other places. And so if you're going to be doing something that parallels something that you know is already available, explain why your project stands apart from what's already out there. Okay, so a few common mistakes. Reviewers don't spend very much time on proposals that just are very tangential to the main thrust of the funding priorities. Reviewers shy away from projects that they feel are just too expensive relative to the overall benefit. So when reviewers are looking at several similar projects, just like you when you're going grocery shopping, you might pick, you're going to take a second look at that one that's a little less expensive. See, is that really going to meet our need? Is that a little bit better? The other thing that we often see in review teams is that they might be looking at two relatively inexpensive projects versus one big expensive project, and they feel that the value might be equal across all those. They'll often go for funding two lower cost projects rather than that one big expensive project. And that's, to me, it's simply sort of a human nature thing. Another thing that we see that's sometimes a mistake is that the proposal does a great job of outlining the problem, but it's not clear how the project activities are going to really mitigate that problem. So keep that in mind. And then this isn't just another thing that we hear in review teams. We hear reviewers say, gee, I just don't think that these stakeholders are going to actually use this thing that they're going to deliver. So have that little reality check. And that's maybe where bringing in some consultants from your local industry group might help out to be like, oh, well, I'm not sure they're going to use it, but at least they're talking with their industry group, or maybe it's a deliverable for your states or other audiences, show in your proposal how you're weaving those collaborators or potential collaborators or experts into your project to make sure that the deliverables will be used. All right, so that is about it. We're going to wrap it up. Really have hammered these home already, but really quickly, start now. If you're not already in Easy Fed Grants or have an EOF account, get going. If you're going to be relying on people in your organization who have all those accesses and accounts, do double check with them, make sure they're going to be around on the day that you want to submit your proposal. If you're claiming your indirect costs, attach your current NICRA, make sure your calculation is correct as noted in the meeting chat. Our guidelines on use of funds, that's on our NADPRP website, has examples on how to calculate indirect costs and as well as what Laura went over today. As we've said, triple check that the amount you're requesting is consistent between all your different application package forms. Check that your performance period is consistent between the application documents. Read the applications in the funding. Oh, read the instructions in the financial plan carefully. Sorry, FP is financial plan in this slide. So the financial plan this year is a little different in that it's asking you to list your costs for each objective in the project. So have a careful look at those financial plan instructions. And those are also available on our NADPRP website. Make sure in your work plan and in your other forms that your contacts are listed correctly, and make sure that those who will need to be in Easy Fed Grants to submit your proposal do have an active account. So it's just like that same thing of what Laura was saying. It's really a bummer for us if an applicant contacts us in the last day and says, oh, I thought I have an Easy Fed Grants, I thought I had an Easy Fed Grants account, but it's just not working. All right, so last thing, just a big plug, everything you need to know and everything we've covered today is on our NADPRP website. You can Google APHIS NADPRP to find that. It's also going to have today's webinar recording and our slide deck. So with that, I would like to open it up to any questions you all have. Now, I see a little bit going on in the chat. Oh, I see. There seems to be a problem. Yeah, there are some days when the APHIS website is having a little problem. I'll ask somebody on my team to maybe look through our emails if we maybe have gotten an APHIS notification that our site might be down today.
Yeah, Julie, I just saw an email come through that we're having some connectivity issues, our internal and external resources.
Okay, so yep, the APHIS website might be having some troubles today, but please check back. So I see some good questions coming into the chat. I'm going to try to address those. Are bees considered livestock? So technically bees are livestock because they meet the Animal Health Protection Act definition. I have to admit that we've never used NADPRP funds to fund a bee-related project. We've actually never received a bee-related proposal. So we certainly can't prevent you from submitting a proposal. I would just say that it's we haven't been there yet, but that's not to say we couldn't go there. Another question here is, are professors or grad students at non-land grant universities eligible to apply? So technically, yes. And I can't tell you why. Congress specified in the Farm Bill language land grant universities, but they also provided USDA with some flexibility to consider other applicants. And this is another situation where I can't think of a situation yet where we have received a proposal from a non-land grant university, but I absolutely feel like that proposal would be considered. Okay, really good question here from Carol. Can participants like farmers and private consultants be paid for their time being trained? So this gets into using federal funds for incentives, and I would say no. I think it's an allowable expense, but our reviewers tend to feel that it's not a good idea. So we don't usually pay or give other incentives for participants like farmers and private consultants to participate in a training event. We might motivate them by providing some travel money. So if they need to travel a long distance, we have done that before in the NADPRP program. So Carol, let me know if that does not answer your question. Oh, Alberto, please go ahead and ask your question. If hopefully you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you. So I'm trying to work on a couple of different projects, but I want to make sure I understand the process well. And so in my understanding, I cannot be, I work for a business and so a private institution. I cannot be the primary sponsor of a project. Is that right? It has to be somebody else, maybe somebody with a land grant university or somebody like that, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So that's the way Congress established the program. The applicant has to be on one of those eligible entities we listed earlier on, but you can enter as a sub awardee. So you can, you know, if say a university submits a proposal, you might be a contractor, or a subaward might be issued to you as a private partner, and that's how we create that public-private partnerships.
Right, and so that, say, principal investigator has to have all of the requirements, the having the SAM
Yes.
Accreditation and also or account, and also the e-authentication account is not something that I already have. My e-authentication account level 2. They cannot use my account to proceed with the application. Is that correct? That the principal investigator has to get all these accounts set up in case he or she does not have it yet?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep, it's the applicant is responsible, and the NADPRP program and USDA will enter into a cooperative agreement with that applicant. And then if you're a subject matter expert, or a private entity, they can subaward to you or enter into a contract with you. But the applicant is responsible. So the applicant, who is the eligible entity, like the university or the state, they're the ones who need all of those, the EOF, the SAM, and all those capabilities. They cannot use your account.
Great. Thank you very much.
You bet. Okay. Bonna has a good question here. Can the project be a capacity building related project in a foreign country to help prevent the introduction of foreign animal diseases in the US? We haven't funded anything like that before. I don't want to be too quick to say no, because I think it might actually be allowed in our funding opportunity announcement. As long as, the applicant and that the eligible entity has to be one of our eligible entities, a state animal health official, a university, and so on. I think in some cases that capacity building in a foreign country might be considered. So I would say yes, it's a proposal that could be submitted. And Bon, if I didn't answer your question, please let me know. Oh, G Tellers, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Julie. I was trying to get into the website, but I have problems also. So you're gonna fix that, or when should we try to log in?
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. If as luck would have it, today of all days, the APHIS website, the USDA APHIS website is not working, and that means our NADPRP site may not be accessible. I would imagine it will be fixed by this afternoon, and certainly it'll be fixed by tomorrow.
Okay. The other question is, how can I don't have a easy Fed grants or e-auth account. And I'm sorry, I get in late. Perhaps you did it. You mentioned this in the beginning. Could you please confirm how can I open an account? I work at the University of Arkansas.
Yeah, sure. The best thing to do is to go to our NADPRP website and read our full funding opportunity announcement, because there's appendices in there that will step you through those processes. So,
Very good.
yeah, and then we're also going to post this webinar, and we'll also put the slides, and these slides that we'll post on our NADPRP website as soon as the site's working, we'll have links to the resources you need to create those accounts.
Oh, fantastic.
Julie, if I may just add a comment to Memo's questions. Memo, I have done some of those processes to get an account, and it is somewhat fairly intuitive, and so it shouldn't be too difficult, but we can get together and we can work it out at some point one of these days when I am heading over to the university.
Very
Thanks.
good. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Carol, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so just following up about stakeholders or participants in a project where they're getting trained. I understand how they can't be paid, but what about if they're going to take a day off the farm and they have to hire somebody to cover what they would do? Or, you know what I'm saying? They're losing money by taking time to get trained. So is that a possibility? That with other grants, we've done that.
I'm going to lean towards no.
Okay,
And
all
Laura,
right.
Laura, you can jump in and help me out there if you think that it's different. So, I mean, obviously, producers are going to lose a lot of money if they're suffer from an animal disease outbreak on their farm.
Okay.
We're not allowed to pay with with money or cash or Walmart gift cards. Kind of
course.
is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sorry about that. Laura, do you
No,
think that
that's
there's some more room here than what I'm indicating?
I know that this question has come up before, and I would have to go back and look in my notes. But if Carol, if you want to send your question to our VS NADPRP email inbox, just so that we can make sure that we follow up and have a confirmed answer for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm used to other grant programs where they are, so that's not bad. A couple others, if you don't mind, while I'm here. If we already have another grant that's dealing with biosecurity, and this project would augment it or multiply it, is that a good idea, or to do that?
That is a good idea. Just make sure there's actually a spot in the work plan template where we ask, describe how this relates to other projects that are funded from other sources, and make sure that you emphasize that, this work is separate. We're not double dipping, we're actually augmenting what's being done, the work being done in this other award.
Okay. For example, we have something with small ruminants and agritourism and biosecurity, and we can only do a few farms. So maybe if we could expand it to more farms, that would really help. But
yeah,
okay. And then is a project that deals with a foreign animal disease have increased priority over an emerging disease, or just general biosecurity over a wider audience?
Well, biosecurity for foreign animal diseases is just as effective as biosecurity for domestic diseases. So maybe biosecurity is not the best example, but if you're developing a sheep or goat vaccine, foreign or emerging animal disease, or a disease that has very high economic consequences for the industry, will be preferred over others. In general, the NADPRP program does prioritize funding for projects that are supporting response and preparedness for foreign and emerging animal diseases, but others can be considered.
Okay, like CWD.
Right.
Not a huge audience in terms of people who raise them, but it seems to be quite a gapped area, an area where there's a lot of gaps.
Well, I will say that NADPRP funding is not typically directed toward any projects where APHIS and USDA already has appropriated funding lines. So we have appropriated funding for chronic wasting disease. So, and we also have funding opportunities for chronic wasting disease. So we're not likely to use NADPRP funds in those areas.
Okay.
Other program diseases are like tuberculosis, brucellosis. So we don't generally have NADPRP funding overlap those areas where we have appropriated line items. And one thing I want to mention, because we're going to get into the top of the hour, I'm glad to stay on here and take everybody's questions. But Missy put in the chat and Laura mentioned that we do have this NADPRP mailbox, and I absolutely please send your questions to it. I've showing it here on the slide. It's vs.nadprep@usda.gov. So Nicola, go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to ask about study systems investigating wild animal reservoirs. So for example, if we're thinking about a system to improve preparedness and response to avian influenza outbreaks that investigates wild birds, would that be allowed?
I might need you to repeat that. Can you just, but I think that you're asking, do we fund projects related to wild bird surveillance?
Yeah, so exactly. So that would be, one of the arms of the study, but we're curious whether, if that doesn't necessarily fit neatly within the description of livestock, whether that would be a less competitive idea.
That is going to be a less competitive idea. And this is really how Congress established the NADPRP program. It's really focused on livestock preparedness. Now, I know that the next argument, and you can make a very good argument, that wild populations have a very significant impact on domestic livestock species. But in general, the projects that NADPRP has leaned toward funding and that the reviewers lean toward funding are not projects that are really strongly or exclusively focused on disease transmission or surveillance in wild populations.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. You guys are asking fantastic questions. Anybody else? Okay, well, if you think of anything, let me go back to this slide. Please do email your questions to us at vs.nadprep@usda.gov. You may be like me and you'll have your best question about 10 minutes after we end the call. Thank you all very much for your time today. We wish you well in your application process. If you have any problems, please reach out to us. Again, I'm very sorry that the APHIS website is down today and you're not able to click on those links right now. I hope that will be resolved really soon. I would imagine in most cases when the APHIS site's down, it's up again within a few hours. So just try back. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.